With her entire life savings drained and facing eviction from her apartment, Elena Morgan stared in disbelief as workers uncovered a hidden underground vault beneath the flooded mansion she had impulsively purchased at auction. Inside lay leather-bound journals and classified documents bearing presidential seals, papers that would soon bring the Secretary of State to her doorstep with an offer that would transform her financial ruin into an extraordinary new beginning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The relentless autumn rain hammered against the cracked windows of the dilapidated mansion as Elena Morgan studied the water damage. Assessments spread across what was once an elegant dining table. At 42, the fresh worry lines around her eyes and the thin white streak through her otherwise dark hair told the story of a woman who had endured a difficult year. Despite the exhaustion shadowing her features, her eyes burned with the fierce determination that had become her lifeline. "The West Wing Foundation is completely compromised," she said, tracing her finger along the red-marked areas of the blueprint. "We need to start pumping the basement immediately, or we'll lose the entire structure." Marcus Delgado, the contractor, she had somehow convinced to look at the property despite her precarious finances, leaned against a peeling wall as he studied the plans beside her. At 58, his weathered face carried deep creases earned from decades of restoring historic buildings across New England. "Drainage system might already be collapsed," he said, his voice gravelly from years of working in dusty construction sites. "Restoration costs on a property like this, especially with the flooding, will be astronomical. Are you sure about this, Elena?" The television droned in the background, the local meteorologist's voice tight with urgency. "Worst flooding Essex County has seen in 40 years. Mandatory evacuations in effect for Riverside. Emergency crews overwhelmed." The once grand foyer of Westcott Manor, with its water-stained marble floors and damaged crown molding, had witnessed over a century of history. A massive crystal chandelier, now missing half its pendants, had illuminated society gatherings and political fundraisers during the mansion's glory days. Today, it cast weak shadows over Elena's desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to rebuild her life after losing everything. Sophia Valdez, Elena's oldest friend, entered from the kitchen, rainwater cascading from her plastic poncho. At 45, her practical short haircut and efficient movements spoke of someone who had learned to navigate life's hardships with pragmatic grace. "Roofs leaking in at least 4 places," she reported, accepting the towel Elena handed her. "Waters reached the library and rising. Those first editions you were excited about might already be damaged." Elena's expression darkened. The library, with its floor-to-ceiling shelves of rare books, had been one of the features that convinced her to bid on the property despite her financial situation. Now it was just one more piece of her fragile plan threatened by the relentless waters. Elena moved to the window, staring out at the gray curtain of rain obscuring the overgrown gardens. Westcott Manor had been deteriorating long before the floods, 3 years vacant after the death of its reclusive owner. The once magnificent estate had fallen into severe disrepair. The auction price had been remarkably low, reflecting both the property's condition and the limited number of buyers willing to take on such a massive restoration project. The final notice from her apartment complex had arrived last week, 30 days to vacate. After her husband Michael's sudden death 13 months ago, the discovery of his hidden gambling debts and failed investments had decimated their once comfortable life. The insurance payout that should have provided security had instead gone to creditors, leaving Elena with nothing but mounting bills and a shattered sense of security. "The Donovan estate sold yesterday," Sophia said quietly, pouring coffee into chipped mugs she'd found in a kitchen cabinet. "Got purchased by that luxury resort developer. They're demolishing the main house next month." Marcus's jaw tightened. Vultures have been circling every historic property in the county, tearing down 200 years of history for vacation, condos, and infinity pools. The situation was painfully familiar in Essex County. Historic homes were disappearing, replaced by commercial developments that transformed unique architectural treasures into generic luxury properties. Westcott Manor was one of the last untouched Gilded Age estates remaining, a distinction that brought more historical significance than financial value. Monarch Development called again this morning, Sophia added reluctantly. Offered to take the property off your hands before the flood damage reduces its value further, as they put it. 40 cents on the dollar, I'm guessing, Elena said bitterly. Just enough to cover what I paid at auction, but not a penny for the historical significance or restoration potential. The unspoken reality hung in the air. Westcott Manor wasn't just a desperate investment. It had become Elena's entire future plan. Every remaining dollar from her husband's life insurance after the creditors took their share had gone into purchasing this crumbling estate. If she lost the mansion, she lost everything: her investment, her housing, and her last chance at financial recovery. Elena reached for her rain gear hanging by the door. I'll check the basement myself. Maybe the pumps can still make a difference. Not alone, Marcus insisted, grabbing his weatherproof jacket. Those old foundations can be treacherous when wet. 2 sets of eyes see dangers twice as fast. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This house has already cost you enough, Elena protested softly. Marcus placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. You hired me for an assessment, Elena. Consider this part of my professional obligation. Besides, I've been restoring historic homes for 30 years. I didn't build this reputation by standing back when things got challenging. As they prepared to venture into the mansion's lower levels, the local news anchor's voice rose urgently from the television. Breaking news. Emergency crews report critical structural damage at the Essex County Historical Archives. Valuable historical documents at risk of water damage. Volunteer teams are assembling at Riverside Fire Station. Elena and Marcus exchanged alarmed glances. The Historical Archives building was less than a mile from Westcott Manor, in an area even more prone to flooding. That's terrible, Elena said. Some of those documents date back to the Revolutionary War. We'll check our basement flooding first, Marcus agreed grimly. Then see if they need extra hands at the archives. I know the building restored their windows 5 years ago. Sophia handed them each a flashlight, her eyes reflecting worry she wouldn't voice. That storm cell they've been tracking is supposed to hit within the hour. Don't take any unnecessary risks. As they stepped into the mansion's central hallway, the wind rattled the windows with ominous intensity. Lightning briefly illuminated the grand staircase, transforming the water stains on the once elegant wallpaper into shadowy apparitions. Neither Elena nor Marcus could have imagined how the next hours would forever change the future of Westcott Manor, and how a desperate effort to save the flooded basement would uncover secrets that would reach all the way to Washington, D.C. The ancient service stairs creaked under their weight as Elena led the way into the basement, Marcus following close behind, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air grew colder and damper with each step downward, carrying the unmistakable musty scent of a century-old foundation meeting unwelcome water. Previous owner must have done some renovation down here, Marcus observed as they reached the bottom of the stairs. These support beams aren't original to the house added maybe 30, 40 years ago. Elena's flashlight revealed a basement, far larger than she had expected, stretching beneath the entire footprint of the massive mansion. Portions were finished with wood paneling, now warping from moisture, while other sections revealed the original stone foundation. Several inches of water already covered the floor, reflecting their flashlight beams in distorted ripples. Main. Water intrusion seems to be coming from there, Marcus said. pointing toward the far wall where a steady stream poured through a crack in the stonework. Foundations shifting. Not surprising in a house this old during extreme weather. The pumps Elena had hastily purchased and installed the previous day were struggling against the incoming water, their motors whining with the effort. She checked the hoses leading up and out through a small window, confirming they were still operational. "We need more pumps," she acknowledged, frustrated by the limited impact of her efforts. "And to find the main drainage points. There must be an original system for water management. These old estates usually had sophisticated drainage for their time." They waded carefully through the shallow water, inspecting the perimeter of the massive basement. Marcus examined the construction with professional interest, occasionally stopping to point out features of the original stonework or later modifications. "Craftsmanship on these foundations is extraordinary," he noted, running his hand along a perfectly fitted stone arch. "They don't build like this anymore. These stones have stood for over 140 years. Elena appreciated his evident respect for the property. In Marcus, she had found not just a contractor but someone who understood the historical value of what she was trying to save. In the weeks since purchasing Westcott Manor, most people had regarded her decision as either foolishly romantic or financially suicidal, perhaps both. As they reached the eastern corner of the basement, Elena's flashlight beam caught something unusual, a section of wall that appeared slightly different from the surrounding stonework. "What's that?" she asked, moving closer. Marcus followed, his experienced eye immediately noticing what had caught her attention. Different masonry technique. "And look," he directed his flashlight toward the floor where the water rippled. "Differently. The current's stronger here, like water's draining somewhere." Elena knelt, regardless of the water soaking her jeans, and examined the floor more carefully. A slight depression was visible, and indeed the floodwater seemed to be moving toward it, disappearing into a nearly invisible seam. "There's something underneath," she said, excitement momentarily overriding her concern about the flooding. "A drain, maybe? Or some kind of access point?" Marcus joined her, placing his hand against the unusual section of wall. He pressed experimentally. At different points, his decades of restoration work having taught him that old houses often held secrets in their construction. To their mutual surprise, a section of stonework shifted slightly under pressure. "False wall," Marcus breathed, professional excitement evident in his voice. "Might be an old coal storage area, or maybe a Prohibition-era addition. Let me just—" He applied pressure more deliberately, and with a grinding sound of stone against stone, a narrow section of the wall rotated inward, revealing a dark opening beyond. "Hidden room," Elena whispered, her flashlight beam penetrating the darkness, to reveal a small chamber cut into the bedrock beneath the mansion. "Why would anyone?" Her question died as the beam illuminated the chamber's contents. Unlike the wet basement surrounding them, this hidden room appeared remarkably dry, protected by clever engineering that had channeled water away from it for decades. Inside stood a metal vault door, its once gleaming surface now dulled with age but still intact and securely closed. "That's not a coal cellar," Marcus stated unnecessarily, his flashlight joining Elena's to illuminate the unexpected discovery. "That's a proper vault. Old but sophisticated." Elena stepped carefully into the hidden chamber, drawn by the mystery of this unexpected feature nowhere mentioned in the property records she had so carefully studied before making her purchase. "There's no keyhole," she observed, examining the vault door. "Just this dial mechanism. A combination lock. Standard for high-security vaults from that era," Marcus explained. "Question is, what was valuable enough to hide behind stone and steel in a private residence?" Elena ran her fingers along the edge of the vault door, finding a small metal plate nearly hidden in the shadows. Her flashlight revealed engraved text, the letters formal and precise. "Property of W.H.R., consul to posterity, -1887. WHR? She read aloud, glancing at Marcus questioningly. His expression changed, eyes widening with the realization of what those initials might signify in a mansion of this era. Could be. But that would mean. Before he could complete his thought, a loud crack from above interrupted the moment, the ominous sound of timber giving way somewhere in the mansion structure. Water began pouring more aggressively through the basement ceiling, a clear sign that the storm had intensified and new leaks were forming throughout the house. "We need to secure this room," Elena said decisively, her mind racing with implications of their discovery, even as practical concerns reasserted themselves. "Block the entrance somehow. Keep the water out until we can properly examine it." Marcus nodded, already scanning the basement for materials they could use. "Those plywood sheets by the stairs. We can seal this opening temporarily." "But Elena," he fixed her with a serious look, "if those initials mean what I think they might, you've got something here that goes beyond historical curiosity." They worked quickly, temporarily securing the hidden chamber with available materials before returning upstairs to address the worsening leaks throughout the mansion. The discovery of the vault had added an unexpected dimension to Elena's already complicated situation, transforming her impulsive purchase from merely a desperate financial gamble into something potentially far more significant. As they emerged from the basement, soaked and muddied, but energized by their discovery, they found Sophia engaged in a phone conversation, her expression shifting rapidly from concern to astonishment. "They're here now," she said into the phone, eyes meeting Elena's with a mix of confusion and urgency. "Yes, I'll tell her." She ended the call, turning to Elena with evident bewilderment. "There are people at the gate." "Federal agents, Elena. Something about an anonymous tip regarding historical documents at risk from the flooding." Elena and Marcus exchanged startled glances, the timing too precise to be coincidental. Someone knew about the vault and had been monitoring the property closely enough to be aware of both their presence in the basement and what they might have discovered. Through the rain-streaked windows, headlights were visible approaching on the long, overgrown driveway, official-looking. Black vehicles navigating carefully around flood-damaged sections. "How could anyone possibly know what we just found?" Elena whispered, her mind racing through implications. "We only discovered it ourselves 5 minutes ago." Marcus's expression was grim. Historic properties like this attract attention, especially ones with connections to significant figures. Westcott Manor has been on preservationists' radar for decades. Before they could further discuss this alarming development, a forceful knock sounded at the mansion's front door, audible even over the storm's intensity. Elena smoothed her wet hair back, squared her shoulders, and moved to answer it, uncertain what awaited her but determined to protect both her investment and the historical mystery they had uncovered. As lightning flashed dramatically behind her, Elena opened the massive oak door to find herself facing 2 individuals in dark raincoats, their official credentials already extended for her inspection. "Ms. Morgan?" the woman asked, her demeanor professional but urgent. "I'm Special Agent Diana Chun, Department of Homeland Security. This is Dr. James Harrison from the National Archives. We need to speak with you immediately about what you've discovered in your basement." The storm continued to rage outside, but for Elena, the true tempest was just beginning, one that would connect her flooded mansion to presidential secrets, national security, and a historical mystery that had remained hidden for over a century. In the grand entrance hall of Westcott Manor, water dripping steadily from multiple leaks in the ceiling, Elena found herself facing federal officials who somehow knew about a discovery she had made mere minutes ago. "May we come in?" "Agent," Chun asked, though her tone suggested it wasn't really a question. "What we need to discuss is urgent and confidential." Elena hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. "Of course. Though I should warn you, the house is actively flooding. We're trying to manage the worst of it." The agents entered, their practiced eyes sweeping the deteriorating grandeur of the entrance hall before focusing back on Elena. Behind them, additional personnel remained in their vehicles, visible through the windows. "This is Marcus Delgado, my contractor," Elena explained, gesturing to Marcus, who stood watching the exchange with careful neutrality, "and my friend, Sofia Valdez." Dr. Harrison, a slender man in his 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and the careful posture of someone who handled fragile documents for a living, spoke up. "Ms. Morgan, we have reason to believe you've uncovered a historically significant vault in this property. One potentially containing presidential documents that have been missing from official records for over a century." Elena exchanged glances with Marcus, whose subtle nod confirmed her suspicion about the initials they had found. "WHR," she said quietly. "William Henry Robertson." Agent Chun's eyebrows rose slightly, perhaps surprised by Elena's knowledge. "Yes, President Robertson's private papers disappeared after his death in 1887. Historical records indicate he maintained a secret archive of sensitive diplomatic communications, particularly regarding the European alliance negotiations that defined his presidency. Westcott Manor was built by Robertson's Secretary of State," Marcus added, his knowledge of historical architecture extending to the properties he restored. Charles Westcott was his closest advisor and friend. The estate stayed in the Westcott family until 1976. Dr. Harrison nodded appreciatively. "You know your history, Mr. Delgado. What few people know is that President Robertson entrusted certain sensitive documents to Westcott for safekeeping, papers too politically volatile to keep in official archives, but too historically significant to destroy." Elena processed this information, connecting it to their discovery. The engraving on the vault, "Consul to Posterity," that was referring to this arrangement. "Precisely," Dr. Harrison confirmed. Robertson and Westcott believed these documents would eventually need to be preserved for historical understanding, but only after the political implications had subsided, perhaps decades later. They created a secure repository here, away from Washington's prying eyes. Agent Chun stepped forward, her expression serious. "Ms. Morgan, those documents, if they've survived, remain government property regardless of where they've been stored. Their historical and intelligence value is immeasurable. Some may contain information that, even after all this time, could impact diplomatic relationships." Elena felt a defensive instinct rise. This house, this discovery, it represented her last chance at financial recovery. "I understand the historical significance, but Westcott Manor is my property. I purchased it legally, contents included." "Of course," Agent Chun acknowledged smoothly. "We're not here to seize property without due process. However, given the emergency conditions," she gestured to the worsening leaks and the sound of wind rattling the windows, "we have authorization to secure potentially sensitive government documents at risk of damage." The tension in the room was palpable, broken only by Sophia's practical intervention. "Perhaps we should all move to the library. It's one of the few rooms not actively leaking, and there are still some functional chairs." This sensible suggestion was accepted, and the group relocated to the mansion's grand library. Despite water damage to one corner, the room retained much of its original dignity: floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather-bound volumes, and a massive fireplace with an intricately carved mantel. Once settled, Dr. Harrison continued with evident academic enthusiasm. "The Robertson-Westcott papers have been something of a white whale for historians for generations. Mentions in private correspondence confirm their existence, but their contents remain one of the great historical mysteries of 19th-century American politics." Elena considered her position carefully before responding. "We found the vault less than an hour ago. It's sealed with a combination lock, and we haven't attempted to open it." "Probably wise," Agent Chun noted. "Old mechanisms can be fragile. We have specialists who can open it without damage." Marcus cleared his throat. With all due respect, what exactly are you proposing? Elena owns this property and has invested everything she has in saving it from developers who would demolish it without a second thought for its historical significance. This direct question seemed to prompt a shift in Agent Chun's approach. She exchanged glances with Dr. Harrison before addressing Elena directly. Ms. Morgan, the National Archives and Homeland Security would like to propose an arrangement. We need to secure and preserve these documents, but we recognize your legal ownership of the property and the unique circumstances of this discovery. Dr. Harrison continued, what Agent Chen is suggesting is a cooperative approach. We would provide immediate assistance with your flooding situation emergency pumps. Structural engineers, preservation specialists, stabilize both the mansion and the vault. In exchange? Elena asked, skeptical but interested. In exchange for your cooperation in securing the documents and allowing our experts to assess them properly, Agent Chun explained. No removal without proper documentation and agreement. Your rights as property owner would be respected throughout the process. The offer was tempting, particularly given the worsening storm and Elena's limited resources for addressing the flooding. Still, she sensed there was more to their urgency than simple historical interest. Why Homeland Security? She asked directly. Why not just the National Archives or the Historical Society? These documents are over a century old. Agent Chun's expression remained professional, but her hesitation was noticeable. Some of Robertson's papers potentially contain sensitive diplomatic information regarding early treaties and territorial agreements. While historical, certain documents could have implications for current international relationships if misinterpreted or taken out of context. From outside came the sound of additional vehicles arriving. Through the library windows, Elena could see official emergency management trucks and equipment resources far beyond what she could afford or access independently. They're mobilizing significant resources, Marcus observed quietly to Elena. Whatever's in that vault, they consider it extremely important. Elena weighed her options carefully. The storm was worsening, the mansion's structural integrity was increasingly compromised, and she lacked the funds for proper emergency measures. Yet this discovery potentially represented leverage away to ensure Westcott Manor's preservation, rather than just her temporary financial survival. I'll cooperate under certain conditions, she finally stated, meeting Agent Chun's gaze directly. Your team helps secure the property from further flood damage. Nothing leaves the premises without my knowledge and consent. And most importantly, whatever historical significance is confirmed becomes part of Westcott Manor's official record and preservation status. Dr. Harrison leaned forward, clearly intrigued. You're thinking of pursuing historical landmark designation? Elena nodded. This mansion represents my entire financial investment. If these documents are as significant as you believe, they should help secure Westcott Manor's future as a protected historical site, rather than just another luxury condo development. Agent Chun considered this for a moment before extending her hand. Those terms are reasonable. We'll need to formalize the arrangement, but given the emergency conditions, we can proceed with verbal agreement while our legal team prepares proper documentation. As they shook hands, Elena felt a strange mix of apprehension and hope. What had begun as a desperate last-chance investment had suddenly become entangled with presidential secrets and national security interests. The direction of her future had shifted dramatically in the space of an hour, from simply fighting rising floodwaters to potentially presiding over a nationally significant historical discovery. Outside, government specialists were already unloading equipment, preparing to secure both the mansion and its unexpected historical treasure from the ravages of the storm. Within the hour, Westcott Manor transformed from an abandoned, flooding ruin into the center of a coordinated federal emergency operation, all because of what might lie within that century-old vault in the basement. the true nature of her discovery, and how it would reshape her future, remained locked behind steel and stone, waiting to reveal secrets that had been patiently biding their time for over 100 years. The floodwaters in the basement had risen another 3 inches in the hour since federal agents arrived at Westcott Manor. Elena Morgan stood at the hidden chamber entrance, illuminated now by powerful emergency lights that cast harsh shadows across the century-old stonework. The temporary barriers she and Marcus had hastily installed were holding, but just barely water seeping through cracks despite their efforts. "We need to move quickly," Dr. Harrison said, adjusting his glasses as he examined the vault door with reverent fascination. The structural engineering team reports significant pressure building against the foundation walls. This entire section could be compromised if the storm intensifies. Around them, a choreographed emergency response unfolded with military precision. Homeland Security personnel had established a command center in the mansion's dining room, while National Archives conservators prepared specialized equipment for document preservation. Outside, massive pumps battled the rising waters, their mechanical drone a constant reminder of the race against nature they were engaged in. Agent Chun approached, tablet in hand displaying schematics of the basement. "The water management team has identified the original drainage system. They're working to clear blockages, but parts have collapsed over the decades. Ms. Morgan, do you have any information about renovations to the foundation during previous ownership?" Elena shook her head, watching as specialists photographed and measured every aspect of the hidden chamber. The property records were incomplete. Previous owner was reclusive, barely maintained the place for 20 years before his death. The discovery of the vault had transformed Elena's position dramatically. Just hours earlier, she had been a bankrupt widow making a desperate last stand to save herself from complete financial ruin. Now she stood surrounded by federal agents and historical experts, all focused intently on what she had found beneath her crumbling mansion. "We've analyzed the locking mechanism," announced a specialist in antique security systems, a compact woman with steady hands and focused eyes. "It's a Sargent and Greenleaf 1873 model top security for its era. 3-wheel combination lock with false gates to prevent manipulation. Opening it without damage will be delicate work." "Can you do it?" Agent Chun asked. The specialist nodded confidently. "Yes, but I'll need time and optimal conditions. The mechanism has likely deteriorated. Too much force or vibration could cause internal components to fail permanently." Dr. Harrison looked alarmed. "If the mechanism fails, would we need to cut through?" "Cutting would be a last resort," the specialist replied. "These vaults were designed with redundancies. There might be alternative access methods documented somewhere." Elena had been quietly observing, processing the surreal nature of her situation, when a thought occurred to her. The library, there might be information there. The original owner was Secretary of State Charles Westcott. If he built this vault to store presidential papers, he might have left clues about accessing it. The historian's eyes lit up. "Excellent thinking, Ms. Morgan. Personal libraries often contain coded references or hidden information, especially for politically sensitive matters." Elena led Dr. Harrison and Agent Chun back upstairs to the Grand Library, where water now pooled in the northeast corner despite efforts to patch the leaking roof. National Archives personnel had already begun carefully relocating the most valuable books to drier areas, cataloging each volume as they worked. Westcott would have needed access instructions somewhere secure, but accessible to him, Elena reasoned, scanning the towering bookshelves. Something that wouldn't attract attention, but would be meaningful to him personally. Dr. Harrison nodded appreciatively. Presidential confidants often used literary references as memory aids for sensitive information. Books they discussed together, passages with personal significance. They began a methodical search, focusing on volumes that might have personal connections to either Westcott or President Robertson. The mansion's library was extensive, containing nearly 4,000 volumes spanning literature, history, law, and politics. As Elena carefully examined a shelf of leather-bound first editions, Sophia appeared in the doorway, her expression both excited and perplexed. "Elena, you need to see this," she said, holding up an old photograph in a protective sleeve. "I found it while helping move books from the water-damaged section." The sepia-toned photograph showed two distinguished men in formal 19th-century attire, standing before what was unmistakably Westcott Manor in its original grandeur. One man Elena recognized immediately from historical portraits, President William Henry Robertson, his distinctive beard and penetrating gaze unmistakable despite the photograph's age. Beside him stood a slightly taller man, presumably Charles Westcott, holding what appeared to be architectural plans. "Look at what's on the table beside them." Sophia pointed to a small detail almost lost in the photographs. Background an open book with something inserted between its pages. Dr. Harrison carefully examined the image. "Can we enlarge this section?" A digital specialist was summoned, who quickly scanned and enhanced the relevant portion of the photograph. The book's title became clearly visible: Diplomatic History of the American Revolution by Francis Wharton, published in 1886. "That's it," Dr. Harrison breathed, excitement evident in his voice. Wharton's diplomatic history was considered the definitive work on early American foreign relations. Robertson and Westcott both contributed source material to Wharton for that volume. "Is it still here?" Agent Chun asked, glancing at the thousands of books surrounding them. Elena was already moving toward the history section, scanning shelves with newfound purpose. After several tense minutes, she pulled a leather-bound volume from the shelf. Its gilt lettering faded but still legible. "This is it," she confirmed, carefully opening the aged book. Inside, pressed between pages discussing the Franco-American alliance of 1778, they found a small card yellowed with age. Written in faded ink was what appeared to be a simple notation: "In liberty's pursuit, 3 revolutions complete the circle. FA 621778. Dr. Harrison examined the card with professional reverence. A cipher. 3 revolutions likely. Refers to the 3 wheels of the combination lock. The date is significant: February 6, 1778, when France formally recognized American independence, changing the course of the Revolutionary War." "But what does F stand for?" Elena asked, studying the cryptic message. "Franco-American," Agent Chun suggested. Dr. Harrison shook his head. "Too obvious for a security cipher. It must be something more personal to Robertson and Westcott." A young researcher who had been documenting the library's contents approached tentatively. "Excuse me, but President Robertson's biography mentions that founding architect was his favorite metaphor for Washington's role in establishing diplomatic relations. He used it repeatedly in private correspondence." Dr. Harrison's expression brightened. "Of course. Founding architect, Robertson considered Washington the architect of American diplomacy. And if we translate the date to numbers for a combination lock..." Elena studied the cipher again. 6, 2, and 1778. "But that's 4 numbers, not 3. "Not necessarily," the security specialist said, joining them after being summoned from the basement. "These old 3-wheel locks typically use a number sequence where you turn right to the first number, left to the second, then right again to the third. If we interpret 1778 as the 3rd number..." "That doesn't work," Dr. Harrison interrupted gently. "Combination locks of this era had number ranges only up to 100.1778 wouldn't fit." The group fell silent, contemplating the puzzle. Elena stared at the card, turning it over to find it blank on the reverse. Something about the phrasing nagged at her. 3 revolutions complete the circle," she murmured. "What if it's not just about turning the dial? What if revolutions has another meaning?" Marcus, who had joined them after checking on the pumping operations, offered a perspective from his experience with historical buildings. In architecture and mechanical systems of that era, they often used the word revolution to mean a complete cycle or transformation, like how the American Revolution transformed colonies into a nation. This observation sparked something in Elena's mind. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, and... She looked up at Dr. Harrison. What was the third major revolution of that historical period? The Haitian Revolution, he answered immediately. Completed in 1804 when Haiti declared independence. It was the third major democratic revolution of the era, following America and France. Elena turned to the security specialist. Could the combination be the 2nd of June 78, where 78 represents 1778, the year of the Franco-American alliance? The specialist considered this possible. Early combination locks often used 2-digit numbers. Let me check the mechanism again to confirm the range. As the specialist departed to examine the vault lock more closely, the conversation was interrupted by an urgent call from the command center. Water pressure against the foundation had increased dramatically as a nearby stream overflowed its banks. The structural integrity of the entire east wing, including the section above the hidden chamber, was now at critical risk. We need to open that vault immediately, Agent Chun declared, her professional calm masking growing concern. If those documents have survived this long, we can't lose them now to a preventable disaster. The group rushed back to the basement, where the situation had deteriorated visibly. Despite the industrial pumps working at maximum capacity, the water level continued to rise. The temporary barriers around the hidden chamber entrance showed signs of imminent failure. The security specialist had already prepared the antique lock for an attempt, carefully cleaning and examining the mechanism without disturbing its internal components. The dial markings go from 0 to 100, she confirmed. The combination 6278 is within range. I believe Ms. Morgan's interpretation is our best option. Elena found herself at the center of attention, the federal agents and historians looking to her for the decision. This was still her property, her discovery. Despite the government's interest and assistance, they had maintained the respectful fiction that she remained in control of the situation. Try the combination, she authorized, heart pounding with anticipation. The specialist began the delicate process, turning the dial with expert precision. Right to 6, left past 6 to 2, right past 2 to 78. With the final number aligned, she gently tested the handle. Nothing happened. The mechanism might be seized after all this time, the specialist explained, disappointment evident. Let me try once more with slight variations. As she reset the dial, Dr. Harrison studied the cipher. Card again. Wait, the notation specifically mentions 3 revolutions complete the circle. What if the numbers themselves represent the revolutions? Elena caught his thinking immediately. The American Revolution, 1776. The French Revolution, 1789. The Haitian Revolution, 1804. The security specialist looked up. Those numbers exceed the dial's range. Not if we reduce them, Agent Chun suggested. Take the last 2 digits of each year, 76 to 8904. The specialist nodded and began again, turning the dial with methodical precision. Right to 76, left past 76 to 89, right past 89 to 4. A distinct click echoed through the chamber. The vault was unlocked. A collective breath was held as the specialist carefully rotated the heavy handle and pulled. After initial resistance, the door swung open with surprising smoothness, revealing a small chamber lined with metal shelving. Unlike the water-threatened basement outside, the interior of the vault remained completely dry, protected by ingenious 19th century engineering that had channeled water away from this precious repository for over a century. Inside, arranged with meticulous care, sat leather document boxes, each bearing labels in elegant script. Glass-enclosed shelves contained bound journals, loose papers secured with ribbon, and several small wooden cases. Dr. Harrison approached reverently, his trained eye immediately recognizing the historical significance of what they were seeing. These are exactly as described in Robertson's private correspondence, his personal diplomatic archive. Materials too sensitive for official records, but too important to destroy. Elena stepped inside beside him, overwhelmed by the realization that she had uncovered a literal vault of American presidential history. The documents represented not just historical artifacts, but potentially a lifeline for her financial situation and the future of Westcott Manor. As Dr. Harrison carefully examined the nearest document box, his expression shifted from professional interest to astonishment. This contains Robertson's personal notes from the Pacific Territory negotiations of 1884, correspondence never included in the official record. Historians have debated the details of those negotiations for generations. Agent Chun joined them, her focus practical rather than academic. We need to secure these materials immediately. The water situation is worsening by the minute. How do we move them safely? Elena asked, aware that improper handling could damage delicate paper that had been preserved in this controlled environment for decades. We have preservation specialists standing by upstairs with archival containers, Dr. Harrison explained. Each document will be photographed in place before being moved, maintaining their original organization and context. The next hours passed in a blur of focused activity. As water continued to rise in the basement, a human chain formed from the vault to the mansion's second floor, where a temporary preservation lab had been established in the master bedroom, the driest room available. National Archives specialists worked with practiced efficiency, documenting and securing each item before it left the vault. Elena found herself working alongside professionals who normally handled the nation's most precious historical documents, passing carefully packaged materials up the line. The contents of the vault proved even more extensive than initially apparent. Nearly 300 separate items including letters, journals, maps, treaties, and diplomatic correspondence spanning President Robertson's entire career. Outside, the storm finally began to subside as dawn approached. The immediate threat to the mansion's structure had been contained, though significant damage had occurred throughout the property. The emergency pumps had prevented catastrophic foundation failure, but the East Wing's first floor was extensively water damaged. As the preservation team secured the last of the documents, Elena found herself standing in what had been the mansion's grand ballroom, now serving as an improper command center for the federal operation. Large tables had been arranged where agents and historians carefully examined the first batch of processed documents. Dr. Harrison approached, his exhausted face illuminated with intellectual excitement. Ms. Morgan, the initial assessment confirms these are indeed President Robertson's personal diplomatic papers. The historical significance is simply extraordinary. Agent Chun joined them, her professional demeanor slightly softened after the successful retrieval operation. The documents will require extensive conservation work and academic analysis. We'd like to propose a formal arrangement for their proper handling and eventual public access. Elena nodded, too overwhelmed to fully process the implications. What happens now? Now, came a new voice from the doorway. We discuss the future of both these documents and Westcott Manor itself. The three turned to see a distinguished woman in her 60s entering the room, flanked by aides and security personnel. Despite the early hour and emergency conditions, she was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her silver hair perfectly arranged, projecting an aura of calm authority. Secretary Harrington, Agent Chun acknowledged, straightening perceptibly. Secretary of State Elizabeth Harrington, Dr. Harrison explained quietly to Elena, whose surprise must have been evident. The State Department has oversight of diplomatic archives. Elena found herself face to face with one of the most powerful officials in the federal government, who had apparently deemed this discovery important, enough to warrant her personal attention despite the ongoing storm emergency. "Ms. Morgan," the secretary greeted her with a firm handshake. "I understand we have you to thank for preserving a significant piece of American diplomatic history." "I just bought a flooded mansion," Elena replied, somewhat dazed by this latest development. Finding a secret vault of presidential papers wasn't exactly in my renovation budget. A hint of genuine amusement crossed the secretary's face. "Nonetheless, your actions have secured documents of immense historical and diplomatic value. President Robertson's Pacific Territory negotiations established diplomatic principles our State Department still references today." She gestured toward the documents being carefully examined nearby. "These papers fill crucial gaps in our understanding of American diplomatic history. The State Department, in conjunction with the National Archives, would like to discuss a formal arrangement that benefits both the historical record and your personal situation." Elena felt a sudden wariness. Throughout this extraordinary night, she had maintained some control over her discovery. The secretary's arrival suggested the stakes and the government's interest were even higher than she had realized. "What kind of arrangement?" she asked cautiously. Secretary Harrington nodded to an aide, who handed her a folder embossed with the State Department seal. "A proposal that acknowledges both the national significance of these documents and your ownership. Rights to the property where they were discovered." She opened the folder and continued, "The State Department, in partnership with the National Historical Preservation Trust, would like to designate Westcott Manor as a National Historical Landmark with specific focus on its significance to American diplomatic history." Elena processed this information, understanding its potential impact on her precarious financial situation. Historical landmark designation would protect the mansion from development, potentially securing both its future and her investment. The designation would come with substantial restoration grants. Secretary Harrington continued, "sufficient to return Westcott Manor to its original grandeur. Additionally, we propose establishing the Robertson Westcott Center for Diplomatic History here on the grounds, a research facility and museum open to scholars and the public." The scope of the proposal was breathtaking. What had begun as Elena's desperate last stand against financial ruin was transforming into something far beyond her initial hopes of simply restoring the mansion for resale. "And my role in this?" Elena asked, sensing there must be more to the arrangement. "We would like to offer you the position of executive director," the secretary stated. "Your background in museum administration before your husband's passing makes you uniquely qualified. The position includes residence rights to the private quarters of the mansion and a substantial annual salary funded through the Historical Trust." Elena felt momentarily dizzy as the pieces fell into place. Her previous career abandoned during her husband's illness and the subsequent financial collapse had been in cultural institution management. Secretary Harrington's staff had clearly conducted thorough background research during the night. "This is overwhelming," Elena admitted, looking around at the water-damaged ballroom that was apparently being offered as the centerpiece of a new National Historical Institution with herself at its helm. "Take time to consider," Secretary Harrington advised. "The formal proposal includes all details regarding funding, restoration timelines, and your contractual position. For now, we need your permission to transfer the documents to proper conservation facilities while maintaining clear records of their provenance and your discovery rights." As dawn broke over Westcott Manor, Elena found herself signing temporary custody agreements for the documents while being assured of her central role in their future presentation and interpretation. The night's extraordinary events, from desperate flood mitigation to presidential vault discovery to a personal offer from the Secretary of State, had transformed her circumstances so completely that she struggled to process the implications. Standing on the mansion's east terrace as the first sunlight illuminated the storm-damaged grounds, Elena was joined by Sophia, who had worked tirelessly throughout the night helping coordinate the emergency response. "So," Sophia said simply, "Executive Director of a National Historical Center. Quite a promotion from bankrupt widow with a flooded mansion in less than 24 hours. Elena gazed out at the estate grounds, seeing them now not as a desperate last investment, but as the setting for an institution of national significance, with herself no longer fighting for survival but leading a prestigious historical center. "Life changes in an instant," she replied quietly. "Yesterday I was facing homelessness. Today I'm being offered the chance to preserve history and rebuild my life simultaneously." As federal personnel continued their work inside the mansion, Elena allowed herself a moment to absorb the transformation of her circumstances, a transformation as dramatic and unexpected as the presidential secrets that had lain hidden beneath her feet, waiting for precisely the right moment to emerge from darkness into light. 3 months after the discovery of President Robertson's secret vault, Westcott Manor stood transformed. The floodwaters had long since receded, leaving behind not destruction but opportunity. Scaffolding embraced the mansion's exterior where master craftspeople meticulously restored the original architectural details. The once overgrown grounds now featured organized excavations where landscape archaeologists uncovered the remnants of Charles Westcott's formal gardens, documenting each discovery with scientific precision. Elena Morgan stood in what had once been the water-damaged ballroom, now restored to its 19th century elegance with gleaming hardwood floors and chandelier crystals that caught the late autumn sunlight streaming through tall windows. Before her, architectural plans were spread across a massive table where a team of preservation specialists, historians and museum designers engaged in animated discussion about the final layout for the Robertson Westcott Center for Diplomatic History. "The main exhibition hall needs more space for interactive displays," argued Dr. Lydia Chun, the museum development specialist who had joined the project from the Smithsonian. "Modern visitors expect engagement, not just static document displays." "But we can't compromise the architectural integrity of the morning room," countered Marcus, now officially the restoration director for the entire project. "Those bay windows are original features mentioned specifically in Westcott's personal correspondence with the architect." Elena listened to the debate with a small smile, still adjusting to her role as mediator between historical authenticity and public engagement. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind of activity as Secretary Harrington's proposal transformed from concept to reality with remarkable speed. Congressional interest in the discovery had accelerated funding approvals, while academic excitement about the document's contents had attracted world-class talent to the project. "We can preserve the morning room's integrity while still accommodating the interactive elements," Elena suggested, indicating an alternative space on the blueprints. "The former servants' hall has the necessary square footage and fewer original features to consider." Both specialists nodded in agreement. Another small victory in the delicate balancing act Elena navigated daily. Her previous museum experience had proven unexpectedly valuable, though nothing in her career had prepared her for managing a project of this magnitude and historical significance. Sophia entered the ballroom, tablet in hand, her role having evolved from supportive friend to official communications director for the center. The position had been Elena's first executive decision, recognizing that Sophia's practical efficiency and media background made her perfect for managing the growing public interest in Westcott Manor. "The Secretary of State's office just confirmed," Sophia announced. "The President will attend the official opening ceremony next month. They're sending an advance team next week to begin security preparations." This news sent a ripple of excitement through the room. Presidential attendance would guarantee national media coverage and elevate the center's profile significantly. "That's 2 weeks earlier than we expected," Elena noted, mentally recalculating timelines. Can we be ready? Marcus consulted his detailed project management software. The exterior restoration will be complete. The main exhibition spaces in the East Wing are on schedule. The vault recreation is ahead of schedule, actually. It's the West Wing interior that concerns me. Those rooms won't be fully restored. We can adjust the opening tour route, Elena decided. Focus on the completed areas and the vault exhibition. The conservation lab can remain behind the scenes for now. As the team dispersed to continue their various tasks, Elena took a moment to walk through the mansion alone, something she tried to do daily despite her packed schedule. These quiet moments helped her maintain perspective on the extraordinary journey from desperation to purpose that had defined her past year. She made her way to the library, now fully restored with period-appropriate furnishings and climate control systems hidden discreetly within the historical architecture. The room had become her favorite retreat, not just for its beauty, but for its connection to the discovery that had changed everything. Dr. James Harrison looked up from a desk, where he was examining digital scans of Robertson's correspondence. As the National Archives lead historian on the project, he divided his time between Washington and Westcott Manor, coordinating the academic analysis of the vault's contents. Elena. Perfect timing. We've just decoded another of Robertson's cipher passages, he announced, his academic excitement evident. The 1885 Pacific negotiations were even more complex than historians realized. Robertson was simultaneously managing 3 separate diplomatic channels while publicly denying any treaty discussions were occurring. Elena joined him at the desk, genuinely interested in these historical revelations that continued to emerge from the documents. What had begun as simply a financial opportunity had evolved into intellectual fascination with the historical narrative unfolding from her discovery. Have you found any more references to Westcott's role? She asked, having developed particular interest in the original owner's position as confidant and keeper of presidential secrets. Indeed, Dr. Harrison replied, indicating a passage on his screen. This letter essentially confirms that Westcott created the vault specifically at Robertson's request after a security breach at the White House in 1886. Robertson no longer trusted official channels for his most sensitive correspondence. This information added another layer to Elena's connection with the property. Charles Westcott had faced his own impossible choice between official protocols and his personal commitment to preserving historically vital information. His decision, made over a century ago, had created the opportunity now reshaping her life. Dr. Harrison called a young researcher from across the library. "We've found something unusual in the diplomatic pouch from Stockholm." As the historian excused himself to investigate, Elena continued her walk through the mansion, climbing the grand staircase to the second floor. Here, renovation crews worked on restoring bedrooms that would eventually become executive offices and research spaces. The East Wing had been designated as Elena's private residence, part of her compensation package as executive director, though renovations there had been prioritized below the public spaces. The master bedroom suite, still in the early stages of restoration, offered a commanding view of the estate grounds where archaeological work continued. Elena stood at the window, watching as a team carefully excavated what appeared to be a small garden structure near the edge of the formal gardens. Her phone chimed with a message from Marcus. "Found something interesting in the basement. Can you come down?" Intrigued, Elena made her way back downstairs and through the kitchen, where contractors were installing period-appropriate fixtures alongside modern catering equipment needed for future events. The basement scene of her desperate flood fighting and world-changing discovery had been completely transformed. The water damage had been addressed, structural reinforcements installed, and the space reorganized to accommodate mechanical systems while preserving historical elements. She found Marcus near the entrance to what had been the hidden chamber, now secured with preservation-grade Glass walls that would allow future visitors to view the original vault location while protecting the historical space. "What did you find?" Elena asked as she approached. Marcus indicated a section of stone flooring they had recently uncovered. The restoration team removed the modern concrete overlay and found this. Embedded in the original stone floor was a brass plate, tarnished with age but clearly intentional. Engraved on its surface was a quote, "The truest wisdom and character is knowing when to safeguard truth until the world is ready to receive it." WHR to CW, 1886. "It's like they knew," Elena said softly, kneeling to examine the plate more closely. "They created this vault expecting it would eventually be found, just not in their lifetime." "A message across time," Marcus agreed. "They preserved these documents for future generations, trusting someone would eventually understand their importance." The discovery of this small brass acknowledgement, this intentional message from the past, affected Elena deeply. It reinforced the sense of purpose that had been growing within her since accepting leadership of the center. She wasn't just salvaging her own future. She was fulfilling the intentions of those who had created this historical repository over a century ago. "We should incorporate this into the exhibition," she decided. "It captures the essence of what we're trying to communicate about Robertson and Westcott's foresight." As they discussed possibilities, Elena's phone rang. The screen displayed Secretary Harrington, a call she couldn't ignore regardless of the discovery. Her financial desperation had led to an impulsive decision. That decision had placed her in precisely the right location to discover hidden historical treasures. That discovery had attracted resources and opportunities beyond anything she could have imagined. The next morning brought a frenzy of activity as news of the president's expanded plans filtered through the project teams. Additional security preparations were implemented, exhibition timelines accelerated, and media strategies revised to accommodate the heightened profile of the opening ceremony. Elena found herself in back-to-back meetings with government officials, academic partners, and institutional representatives, all eager to align with what was quickly becoming a prestigious national initiative. Through it all, she maintained a clear focus on the center's core mission, preserving and interpreting the historical significance of the Robertson documents while honoring the foresight of those who had secured them for future generations. During a rare, quiet moment in the afternoon, Elena returned to the library where Dr. Harrison was supervising the installation of climate-controlled display cases for the most fragile documents. "These cases are remarkable," she observed, examining the nearly invisible technology maintaining precise environmental conditions with an elegant historical-appearing cabinetry. "State-of-the-art," Dr. Harrison agreed. "The same systems used for the Declaration of Independence and Constitution." Another benefit of the president's interest in our little project. Elena smiled at the characterization. What had begun as discovering a hidden vault in a flooded basement had expanded beyond anyone's expectations, drawing increasing resources and attention as its significance became clear. "I've been thinking about Charles Westcott," she said, glancing around the library that had once been his private retreat. "What courage it must have taken to establish this secret archive. He risked his reputation and political standing to preserve historical truth." Dr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. The diplomat's eternal dilemma balancing transparency against prudence, immediate disclosure against long-term interests. Westcott and Robertson chose a middle path. Not destruction, not full disclosure, but preservation for a future they believed would come. And it did, Elena observed. Just not in their lifetime. "That's the essence of genuine historical stewardship," the historian replied. "Taking actions whose value may not be recognized in your own time, trusting that future generations will understand what you protected and why." This perspective resonated deeply with Elena. Her own actions purchasing a ruined mansion with her last resources had seemed foolish to others at the time. Yet that decision, born of desperation rather than historical foresight, had created the conditions for an important discovery and preservation effort. As she continued her rounds of the property, Elena encountered teams of workers throughout the mansion and grounds, all focused on preparing for the rapidly approaching opening ceremony. Landscapers restored the formal gardens according to archaeological findings, electricians installed subtle lighting to highlight architectural features, and conservators prepared climate-controlled exhibition spaces for the documents themselves. In the former ballroom, now transformed into the main exhibition hall, Sophia was directing the installation of interpretive panels that would guide visitors through the story of Robertson's presidency, Westcott's role as diplomatic confidant, and the century-long journey of the hidden documents. "We've adjusted the narrative to incorporate the president's new initiative," Sophia explained, showing Elena the updated introduction panel. "The exhibition now frames the Robertson documents as the foundation of an ongoing national effort rather than simply a remarkable historical discovery." Elena reviewed the text, impressed by how Sophia had elevated the significance without losing the personal elements of the story, including the dramatic flood and vault discovery that had captivated initial media interest. "You've maintained the human element while expanding the historical context," she observed. "Visitors will connect with both the 19th century figures and the modern discovery narrative." "That's the balance we need," Sophia agreed. "People remember stories about people, not just abstract historical concepts." The drama of a bankrupt widow finding presidential secrets in her flooded basement creates an entry point for visitors to engage with the broader historical significance. As Elena continued through the exhibition space, she found herself reflected in the narrative being constructed, her desperate purchase transformed into a pivotal moment of historical preservation. The story being told wasn't just about Robertson and Westcott, but about the continuous thread of preservation and discovery that had ultimately led to this moment of national recognition. In that realization, Elena found a deeper significance to her journey. What had begun as merely personal survival had evolved into something that would outlast her, a contribution to historical understanding that would inform and inspire long after her own story was forgotten. The flooded mansion she had purchased out of desperation had become not just her salvation, but her legacy. 1 year after the Robertson Westcott Center's grand opening, Elena Morgan stood at the window of her office, watching as a group of high school students gathered on the lawn for a special educational program. The teenagers clustered around interactive stations where graduate fellows demonstrated 19th century diplomatic communication methods, from wax seals and cipher systems to the first telegraph codes. Their enthusiasm was visible even from a distance, hands raising eagerly to volunteer for each demonstration. The center had exceeded all expectations in its first year of operation. Visitor numbers had surpassed projections by nearly 40%. Research fellowship applications had flooded in from prestigious universities worldwide, and the educational programs had earned national recognition for innovation in historical engagement. What had begun as Elena's desperate purchase of a flooded mansion had blossomed into an institution with growing international significance. "The Secretary of State's office just confirmed," Sophia announced, entering with her characteristic efficiency. "They're bringing the Japanese diplomatic delegation for a special tour next Thursday. Apparently, the documents relating to the 1885 Pacific negotiations have become required reading for their diplomatic corps." Elena smiled, still occasionally struck by the surreal evolution of her circumstances. From bankruptcy to hosting international diplomats, life takes unexpected turns. "Speaking of unexpected," Sophia continued, checking her tablet, "the National Historic Preservation Trust called. They're presenting you with their annual Leadership Award at the gala in Washington next month. The official announcement goes out tomorrow." This news gave Elena pause. Professional recognition had begun arriving with increasing frequency, speaking invitations, board appointments, media profiles, all stemming from her leadership of the center. Yet she never forgot that her visionary leadership, as one publication had described it, had begun with the most desperate of financial gambles. "Time to head downstairs," Sophia reminded her. "The symposium opens in 20 minutes, and everyone's expecting remarks from the executive director." The International Symposium on Presidential Papers marked the center's one-year anniversary, bringing together archivists, historians, and government officials to discuss the preservation and interpretation of executive documents. The three-day event would feature presentations on the Robertson Papers and their impact on diplomatic historiography, as well as broader discussions about presidential record-keeping in the digital age. Elena made her way through the mansion's restored corridors, now familiar pathways rather than the daunting, damaged spaces she had first encountered. Westcott Manor had been transformed from a deteriorating ruin into a vibrant institution, its rooms filled daily with researchers, students, and visitors. Yet several reminders of its darkest days remained: a watermark preserved in the basement exhibition space, showing how high the floodwaters had risen before the discovery of the vault; a photograph in the entry hall documenting the mansion's condition at auction; a small display case containing the flashlight Elena had used when first exploring the hidden chamber; the ballroom, now a fully equipped lecture space with state-of-the-art presentation technology concealed within restored 19th-century architectural elements, was filled to capacity for the symposium opening. Academic leaders from major universities sat alongside government archivists and international scholars, all drawn by the continuing revelations emerging from the Robertson documents. As Elena approached the podium, she surveyed the assembled experts with quiet amazement at the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her opening remarks acknowledged both the historical significance of the Robertson Papers and the extraordinary circumstances of their discovery, weaving together the 19th-century narrative of presidential secrecy with the 21st-century story of flood and revelation. The Robertson Westcott Center exists at the intersection of intention and circumstance, she noted, a theme she had often reflected upon. President Robertson and Secretary Westcott intentionally preserved these documents for future generations, creating a secure vault to protect information they deemed too sensitive for their own time, but too valuable to destroy. Yet the discovery of that vault required the precise circumstances that brought together a flooding basement, a desperate homebuyer, and the revealing power of disaster to expose what had been hidden. Following her remarks, Dr. Harrison presented the symposium's keynote address, detailing how the Robertson documents had transformed scholarly understanding of 19th-century diplomatic history. His presentation highlighted several major revelations that had emerged from the collection: secret negotiations with Pacific territories that had established precedents still influencing international maritime law; confidential communications with European powers that revealed previously unknown alliances; private presidential reflections on the ethical dimensions of diplomatic deception. These documents have fundamentally altered our understanding of how American foreign policy developed during a crucial transitional period, Dr. Harrison explained. What we once viewed as disconnected diplomatic initiatives we now recognize as a coherent, if imperfectly executed, strategic vision that shaped international relations for decades afterward. As the day's sessions progressed, Elena moved between presentations, engaging with scholars and officials while maintaining the delicate balance between institutional leadership and academic participation. The center she directed had quickly established itself as more than a repository of historical documents. It had become a nexus for new scholarship that connected historical diplomatic practices with contemporary international relations. During the afternoon break, Elena encountered Marcus in the exhibition hall, where he was explaining the architectural restoration process to a group of preservation specialists. Their professional collaboration had evolved alongside a deepening personal connection over the past year, another unexpected development in Elena's transformed life. The water damage actually revealed original design elements that had been covered by later renovations. Marcus was explaining, indicating the decorative plasterwork that had been uncovered and restored. Sometimes destruction creates opportunities for discovery. This observation, so aligned with Elena's own experience, caught her attention. Marcus noticed her presence and concluded his explanation, joining her as the group moved to the next exhibition area. "You've been quoted by preservation specialists," she noted with amusement. "Your restoration work here has made you something of a celebrity in historical architecture circles." Marcus smiled, acknowledging the change in his own professional standing. The Robertson Westcott restoration had become a case study in preservation literature, and his firm now had a waiting list of historical properties seeking similar transformation. "Not bad for someone who initially told you this place was beyond saving," he replied. "Fortunately, you didn't listen to expert opinion." "Desperation has its advantages," Elena observed. "When you have nothing left to lose, impossible options suddenly seem worth trying." They walked together through the exhibition space, now familiar territory that they had helped create from the flooded ruin of a year earlier. Their conversation turned to upcoming projects, a new wing dedicated to diplomatic education programs, an expanded research library, enhanced visitor facilities in what had once been the mansion's carriage house. The board approved the expansion. "Budget this morning," Elena informed him. "Construction can begin next month, assuming the preservation permits come through on schedule." From trying to save a flooding basement to planning a multi-million-dollar expansion, Marcus marveled. Quite a journey in just a year. This observation stayed with Elena as she returned to the symposium sessions. The contrast between her circumstances now and a year ago remained stark, from financial ruin and imminent homelessness to directing a prestigious institution with international recognition. Yet she never forgot that her current success had emerged directly from what had appeared to be catastrophic failure. That evening, the center hosted a formal reception for symposium participants in the restored gardens. Illuminated pathways guided guests through landscaped spaces that had been reconstructed according to Charles Westcott's original designs, now serving as elegant gathering areas for intellectual exchange. Elena found herself engaged in conversation with the current Secretary of State, who had succeeded Secretary Harrington 6 months earlier. Their discussion focused on how historical documents like the Robertson Papers continued to inform contemporary diplomatic approaches. "What fascinates me about these materials," the Secretary noted, "is how they reveal the enduring patterns in international relations. The specific issues change, but the fundamental dynamics of trust, leverage, and national interest remain remarkably consistent across centuries. That's precisely why we've structured our educational programs around connecting historical practice with contemporary challenges," Elena explained. "Students analyze Robertson's approach to specific diplomatic problems, then consider how those same principles might apply to current international situations." Their conversation was interrupted by an aide informing the secretary of an urgent call from Washington. As he departed, Elena continued circulating among the guests, engaging with scholars and officials while ensuring the event proceeded smoothly. Later, as the reception wound down, she found a quiet moment in the formal garden's central courtyard. The space had been one of the most severely damaged areas during the flood, transformed now into a serene gathering place with restored fountains and period-appropriate plantings. The contrast embodied the center's entire journey, from destruction to renewal, from crisis to opportunity. Dr. Harrison joined her, his academic enthusiasm undiminished after a long day of presentations and discussions. "The symposium is already generating publication proposals," he reported excitedly. 3 university presses have approached me about edited volumes based on the proceedings. The scholarly impact continues to expand. From nearly losing everything to creating something that keeps growing beyond itself, Elena reflected. Sometimes I still can't quite believe the path that led here. That's often how history's most significant developments occur, Dr. Harrison observed. Not through careful planning, but through unexpected convergences, crisis revealing opportunity, disaster exposing value that might otherwise have remained hidden. The following morning brought the symposium's most anticipated session, a panel discussion on the classified Robertson documents that had finally been released for scholarly examination. After months of diplomatic review, the State Department had determined that historical materials no longer pose security concerns for current international negotiations. Elena introduced the session, providing context for both the documents, historical significance, and the careful process of reviewing their contemporary implications. These materials represent a perfect example of how historical documentation can maintain relevance across centuries, she explained. What President Robertson considered too sensitive for public knowledge in his own time continued to intersect with diplomatic considerations nearly 150 years later. The panel featured State Department historians alongside academic experts, each offering perspective on different aspects of the newly released documents. Their discussion revealed how Robertson's confidential negotiations had established precedents that continued to influence territorial claims, resource rights, and international boundaries into the present day. As Elena listened to the scholarly analysis, she reflected on how her personal journey paralleled the document's path. Both had emerged from darkness into light, from hidden obscurity to public significance. Both had transformed from apparent endings, the documents sealed away in a forgotten vault, her own financial collapse into new beginnings with expanding influence. During the lunch break, Elena received an unexpected visitor, former Secretary Harrington, who had stepped down from government service to lead a prestigious international relations institute. Their relationship had evolved from the initial tension of negotiating over the discovered documents to mutual respect and occasional collaboration. The center has exceeded even my optimistic projections, the former secretary noted as Elena showed her recent additions to the exhibition areas. What began as a fortunate historical discovery has become a genuine contribution to diplomatic education and scholarship. Fortune that required near financial ruin to discover, Elena observed with a hint of irony. Sometimes I wonder if I would have had the courage to purchase this place if I'd had other options available. That's often when the most significant choices emerge, when conventional paths disappear. Secretary Harrington replied thoughtfully. Comfort rarely drives discovery. It's desperation, necessity, crisis that push us beyond established boundaries. This perspective resonated with Elena's experience. The mansion that had once represented her desperate last stand against financial ruin now embodied her transformed understanding of value and possibility. The flooded basement that had seemed to confirm the foolishness of her investment had instead revealed historical treasure beyond price. Yet the circle was not closed but spiraling outward, creating expanding possibilities that reached far beyond her personal circumstances. The center's influence continued to grow through educational programs, scholarly research, diplomatic connections, and public engagement. What had begun as Elena's private crisis had evolved into an institution with national significance and international impact. In that moment of reflection, standing amid gardens that had risen from floodwaters to bloom again, Elena understood the deepest truth of her extraordinary journey, that within apparent disaster often lay the seeds of transformation. That courage, in the face of impossible circumstances, could reveal opportunities invisible to conventional wisdom, and that what appeared to be the end of everything might, with persistence and vision, become the foundation for beginnings beyond imagination. The Robertson Westcott Center, born from the convergence of 19th century presidential foresight and 21st century financial desperation, would continue evolving long after its dramatic origin story faded from public memory. Yet it would always embody the essential truth that Elena had discovered in her flooded basement, that sometimes we must face complete submersion before we can uncover the treasures hidden beneath our feet, waiting for precisely the right moment to emerge from darkness into light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.